I'm very lucky because I'm here and I'm meeting Jason Kingsley, who has not just this enormous place to gallop around in horses and swords and spears and all sorts of toys to play with, but also he has quite a stake in something that I've been interested in for a very long time, and that is Judge Dredd. I'm a bit of, there's no secret of this, I've been a bit of a Judge Dredd fan since I was in my teens. What is your connection with Judge Dredd?
Well, I'm the owner and CEO of Rebellion, who owns Judge Dredd. And so we run 2000 AD, we commission the stories, we work with the writers and the artists, and we publish 2000 AD. So Judge Dredd is us, really. I'm the Chief Justice, in a way.
I see. And so it's not just the comics, but it's computer games, films, role-play games, anything Judge Dredd world.
Well, we actually own the Judge Dredd brand. We own all of the 2000 AD stuff, but there's a little bit of creator-owned stuff in it. But basically, we commission stuff on a work-for-hire basis. We pay royalties to creators, but we can do whatever we want with those characters. So we licensed before our time, the Stallone movie. But the Stallone movie, I'm sorry to cause you a connection.
Sorry, I'm all right now. Carry on.
Yeah. So the company would have licensed the Judge Dredd rights to the Stallone movie. And more recently, we worked with DNA, Alex Garland and Andrew McDonald to make the latest installation in the Judge Dredd story with some fantastic success. So we actually worked directly with those filmmakers.
So are you able to reveal any? Is there hope for another Judge Dredd movie or Judge Dredd television series?
I bloody hope
Judge
so.
Dredd, I don't know, playing cards, anything.
Well, we've got some action figures coming out. So those action figures have been announced, so that's really exciting. It's small but really significant. We've got various things in role playing that are happening. We work with Warlord Games, and they've got some licenses for.
They have a skirmish game, don't they?
They've got a skirmish game, which is really exciting to see, and that's nice. Yep. I mean, those are important but modest scale stuff. But what we have been doing for years, and we got very close just before this thing called COVID hit, in being greenlit for a TV show called Mega City 1. So we were very, very, think of a small distance and halve it. We were that close to getting things underway.
And this would have been a fairly big budget.
This would have been a big budget, long, TV show. So about I think we were talking about 6 1-hour shows, all about Mega City 1, featuring Judge Dredd, but actually an ensemble cast set in a particular section of Mega City 1 and telling stories about people that we can kill potentially in the stories. I won't tell you too much about it, because it might get changed again. But then COVID came along and.
Okay, so these were characters that you would create from scratch, rather than taking from the comic.
A bit of both, actually.
Right.
We've largely taken smaller scale characters that you would have experienced in the comic and enlarged their roles or explored their stories more.
Right.
Plus characters that you absolutely will have heard of, like Judge Dredd himself and various of those characters. But it's if you're making something about Judge Dredd, it's difficult to put Judge Dredd in any kind of jeopardy. You can't really kill him. Maybe it can. Maybe it could do a Game of Thrones and Judge Dredd could get killed in episode 2. That would be interesting.
Please don't do that. But you can give us an assurance, can you, that he will never take his helmet off, at least never when we can see him do so?
Yeah, he will, as far as I'm concerned. I had it written into the contract when I worked with DNA.
All right.
And to be fair, everybody agreed 100% with it. We didn't really need it to be written in, but I felt it was.
In view of what happened with Sylvester Stallone, where he takes his helmet off in the first few minutes and keeps it off for almost the entire film.
And you hear the whole audience go, oh. Hollywood's an interesting place.
Is it? I've never heard that before.
It's you have maximum leverage when you've got something somebody else wants, and your leverage, once you sign a piece of paper, your leverage decreases to the point where you can be ignored. I heard an acquaintance of mine tell me about, he had a contract which had consultation in it, because he created a character, and he licensed the character to Hollywood, and he had consultation. And he was quite excited about this, so he read the script, and he made lots of notes, and he'd been very diligent, and they phoned him up one afternoon, and they said, hello, we'd like your thoughts, the script. And he said, oh, fantastic, I'll just go and get my notes. So I led him to get the notes, and he read about a page of notes, and they said, well, thank you, that's lovely. He said, oh, I've got tons more pages. No, we just wanted to consult with you.
Yeah.
And put the phone down on
Yes,
him.
they just needed to be able to say that they had done that.
Yes, and he couldn't then go to court to prove he hadn't been consulted. He'd literally been consulted for about 5 minutes and ignored.
Well, yeah.
And they'd done the thing it said on the page. So, yeah, people are quite vicious when it comes to that kind of thing. And so we are really, really passionate about controlling and managing and protecting, quite frankly, protecting that legacy, because it's important to us.
Well, yes, and it always strikes me as amazing that people will buy the rights to some property which has a very long and loyal, established fan base, and then do something else entirely, annoying the fan base, and the people who are new to it have no reason to understand why that decision was made, because they don't know what they would have got if they'd been given the original the ideas.
I mean, you sometimes have to compromise a little bit. So, for example, we're working with some people on Rogue Trooper, for example, a Rogue Trooper movie. It hasn't been greenlit yet, but Duncan Jones. We're working with some people on the Rogue Trooper movie, Duncan Jones, in particular, and we've talked about what colour Rogue Trooper should be. Now, we don't necessarily want him to be a bright blue. It might look a bit odd.
I can see why you might want to mute it a bit.
We might want to mute that blue, but he definitely, it's written into the contract that he should not be flesh-coloured.
Right.
He not human flesh-coloured or whatever that might be. And so we were playing around with some ideas about how blue he could be at certain, and what that would mean and what it actually does for the movie. So you can be creative about it, but basically Rogue Trooper has got to be other coloured.
Right.
Because that's part of him. Judge Dredd has got to do the things that Judge Dredd does. You can't really have Judge Dredd suddenly decide to, I don't know, what could he do? Suddenly have a complete change of character and do something totally different. I suppose unless he's gone to Dead World or on one of these
Yes,
other...
I don't want to hear Judge Dredd say, well, you can bend the law a bit. I don't want him to hear that.
We'll let it pass. We'll let it pass just this time with a warning.
That was at the end of the Dredd movie, which is an awful lot better than the Judge Dredd movie with Sylvester Stallone. He says of Judge... Cy Anderson, he said, no, she's a pass. I think, no, she's a fail. You're not an idiot, Judge Dredd. You could say that she's failed that particular exam, but I think she's got potential in Psi Division or whatever, or I think she should retake it, or with more training, I think she's got... There are loads of sensible things he could have said, but Judge Dredd would never have said, if you lose your weapon, you will fail, and then she loses a weapon, and then pass her. That's not Judge Dredd.
It would have been quite interesting, actually, in that bit, to have him say, she's a fail. And everybody's expecting her to pass because, she's the heroine and everything, and she's done a really good, she's had a nice character arc, and she's succeeded in it, and he still goes, no, she's a fail, because that would be his character. And then the chief judge says, I'm bending the rules for her, I'm changing the rules, and that then sets up another situation where Dredd's boss is willing to change the rules and bend them for advantage, and that could set up a sequel, for example, couldn't it? It could have been quite an interesting one. Did you like the bit where Anderson says, where there's a whole thing about why you're not wearing a helmet?
Oh, can I remember that bit?
There was a bit right at the very beginning where it says, are you, there's a whole dialogue about you're not wearing a helmet.
Right.
And that's regulations, and she says it interferes with my psychic powers. Well, I made them put a line in because I said, why is she not wearing a helmet when every other judge is wearing a helmet? And so they...
Okay.
There's a little throwaway line in there.
I mean, in the comics, we do see Judge Anderson without her helmet quite a lot.
Yes, but she's allowed to because of her psi talents.
Right.
So she has specific dispensation for it.
Fair enough.
But when she's a rookie, she wouldn't have that.
No.
So
and she should have a white helmet.
She should have a white helmet. She'd be a half eagle. Yeah.
You see, there's all this lore that's been built up over many, many years that loads of people like. All the various codes. I used to know. I can't remember them now, but I used to know. What a 4-1
Justice Division codes.
Oh yeah, I used to know what a 414 was.
I can't remember those now, but I think it stays with you a long time as well. It's only afterwards when talking to somebody like you who has that sort of deep knowledge of the law, you suddenly go, yeah, actually, you're right. That should have happened, and that should have happened. But how do you fix that with somewhere like Hollywood when you've got people who care about the subject, but it's also just it's another project for them, and they'll move on to the next project that they're passionate about?
I suppose you could point to those wonderful exceptions where someone, when a good movie accidentally gets made, and say, well, look, they got it right in that movie, and people actually liked it. And most people complain about the same old tired tropes. Most people complain about characters who are this way in the book, but they change them for the movie. And almost always for the worse. There are very, very, very few exceptions. I would say that the film Dangerous Liaison is better than the book.
Okay.
But that's really rare. And in the Lord of the Rings movies, there were some changes they made which just annoyed me. I think chief example is they're trying to get into the mines of Moria, and in the book, after a while, Gandalf goes, "Oh, it's not speak friend and enter, it's say friend and enter." But in the film, they changed it so that Frodo comes up with the idea, and he says, "What's Elvish for friend?"
Right.
And I was talking to someone about this. He said, "Oh, well, you know, it's fine. Otherwise, it'd be a really boring scene. It'd be just loads of people waiting for an old man." And no, that's why that scene is good. What's the next thing that's going to happen in Lord of the Rings? The next thing is that they're going to lose Gandalf. So why not precede that with a scene in which everyone relies on him? They come to the door, and everyone else just waits around for the wizard to work out how to get through the door because he's the clever one. We're entirely reliant on him. Eventually, he works how to get through, and then falls into in Khazad-dûm. Fly, you fools! And it's more of a loss then. And so if you're going to change, you could have one hell of a good reason to make a change.
Well, the thing that got me in that movie, I know we're getting off 2000 AD a bit here, is Merry and Pippin and what idiots they're kind of made out to be. And in the book, they're not. They have character, but they're actually. They know when Frodo and Sam are preparing to sort of run away and actually go on the adventure. They get them to what's that first the place they get? I can't remember. They get out of the Shire. They have their first encounter. Not is it Bree? No, it's after.
It's the town they go to.
It's the town. I can't remember. Is that the town? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They go to somebody's farm. Farmer somebody's farm.
Farmer Maggot. Is it Farmer Maggot?
Something like that. Anyway, yes.
There's one, and they're trying to make off secretly, but the other hobbits know this, and are preparing to go with them. You know, they're heroically going to keep going with their friends, not chirpily, stupid.
They just in the film they just bump into them. They were stealing vegetables, weren't they, from Farmer Maggots?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they're comedy hobbits, and one of them is Scottish for no reason. And Gimli is a bit of a comedy dwarf for most of the trilogy.
And that whole joke about tossing the dwarf, you know how heavy dwarves are? I mean, they might be short, but they're incredibly strong.
I've never thrown one, I couldn't tell you.
They're strong. They're incredibly strong. They have to be.
Yeah.
So you're not, Aragorn's not going to be able to throw him anyway.
Anyway, Judge Dredd. Yes.
So, what would you do as a story if you had the opportunity to do, I don't know, a movie or a TV show?
Okay, well, very quickly, I'll say that what I won't do is put any of the flipping dark judges in. I wish the dark judges had never been in Judge Dredd. I've never liked them. I don't like magic in Megacity 1. I don't think magic sits happily in that world. It should be the mundane future of this. It's a dystopian future of how this actual world might go, yes. And that's how I think it should be kept that way. So no magic. And my temptation would be to set it against just the general world of the judges and Megacity 1. There was many years ago, there was a story called The Graveyard Shift, which was just what the judges have to cope with on a typical night in Megacity, and it was set over I forget how many episodes. I think that would actually, on its own, make a perfectly good film. I would definitely not have anyone save the entire world. Yeah. I'm so sick of films in which the stakes have to be raised to that level.
It becomes inhuman scale, doesn't it? If you start with the destruction of the world, it's like, actually, I'm bored with this now. Or how many buildings have we seen fall over spectacularly? Skyscrapers collapsing into each other. No concept of the aftermath of the cost of destroying. There's billions of dollars worth of damage done with a fight. Who's paying for that? What's going to happen to insurance premiums? Everybody's taxes are going to go up. Bloody superheroes. They've saved the world, but we're paying twice as much taxes.
Yes, and no nuclear wars, none of that. And I wouldn't have people going off on great long walks into the cursed earth.
I think what we've got to do. My feeling is you've got to try and obviously we've got the fan base that loves 2000 AD and loves Megacity 1 as a place. Megacity 1 is a character all of itself. I mean, we were talking earlier about the architecture. The architecture is quite curvy and very vertical, incredibly dense and mind-bogglingly complex to try and navigate
it's
around.
different as well. No one else has shown a future city that looks like that yet. And so why, if you've bought the rights to Megacity 1, why not show what Megacity 1 looks like? And in the Dredd film, you get one square tower block and then quite low rise for a bit and then another square. That's just not what Megacity looks like.
Well, it's what Johannesburg looks like with some mega blocks put in it.
Okay,
so,
fair enough.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Yeah.
Yes, I would have Judge Dredd in it, but I would think that, for me, one of the central points about Judge Dredd is that he doesn't change. He has no character arc. It's how everyone else reacts to him that's interesting. So he could breeze in, tell people what's going on, breeze out, and then the camera stays in the room with everyone else who's just witnessed Judge Dredd coming in and going out, and I'm going, oh, well, I suppose we better do what he said then. In the film with Sylvester Stallone, there's this absolutely ridiculous trial scene. If you remember, he's accused of murder because Rico pretends to be him, and the first thing I thought of was, well, that's easy. You just ask him the question, so where were you at the time then? And it's extremely easy to locate any judge because they've all got monitors on them. They're all in radio contact constantly. That's the first question. So where were you at the time? I was someone else. Fine, you're innocent then. But no, they didn't do that. And instead, he ends up pleading with the counsel and turning to his lawyer saying, you gotta believe me, you gotta believe me. But that's Judge Dredd in the comic would have been very dignified, would have kept his helmet on, even in the courtroom, and would have spoken very quietly and to the point, and he would have, with dignity, said his piece, and if they'd said, no, you're guilty, he would have just taken it because that's the law, they have ruled it, and he would have walked out of that room with dignity, making everyone else in that room feel this tall because he so outclassed them, and he just took it like a man. That's Judge Dredd, not, sorry.
I like the fact that he's a clone. They've got cloning technology. We've got cloning technology today. The DNA's there. He wasn't. Obviously, somebody's stolen his DNA and planted it on the scene. Wasn't that one of the things?
Yeah, Rico's his twin brother. Yeah.
So okay. Yeah, but that's not conclusive. It's called circumstantial evidence. You know, people's DNA can be transported somewhere else. You've got to have other evidence. You know. Anyway, yes.
So not the best of films. Had the ABC Warriors in it.
Totally different story. I remember watching that going, that's a different comic strip entirely. What's that doing in there?
Yes, and they didn't have the rights. You were telling me they didn't have the rights either.
Excuse me. No, they didn't have the rights. So this is before our time, but I was told by the people at the time they didn't get invited to the premiere of the movie, so they all went to see it as soon as it was released. Because it's like, oh, it's our character. We're very excited about what it's going to do for the comic book, and they expected sales to go up, and the sales didn't go up as a result of it.
I seem to remember my collection of back issues was reduced in value to a third of what it had been before the film came out.
Just shows you what a film that's not well received can do. But yeah, they said they were all sort of watching it, going, okay, it's not quite what we were expecting. But it's got Stallone in it, and he's a big superstar, and hopefully this is going to go really well. And apparently they all turned to each other and went, who licensed ABC Warriors? There's an ABC Warrior there. And everyone went, no, we didn't. That's like, anyway, they got into a big fight about it, legal fight about it. Because it would be like saying you've licensed Mickey Mouse and suddenly you've got Donald Duck appears.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, but it's all Disney. It's like, yeah, but that's not how it works. You've literally licensed Mickey Mouse. You've licensed Judge Dredd and Judge Dredd's World. And these do not feature in Judge Dredd's World.
Hello, it's like me, but with a shinier head. Now, I know a lot of you will fast forward through an advert, so I thought if I talked really quickly, you wouldn't feel that you had to. My sponsor, my wonderful sponsor, is Wondrium, and it's a huge website. Look, huge website with loads and loads of lectures, video lectures by proper lecturers from proper universities from around the world, and they have all sorts of topics. You're bound to find something that you like there's this one. I particularly liked that one. And you can sample this site for free by going to wondrium.com/Lindybeige, and then you can watch what you like, and then if you like it, become a subscriber. So that'll be good, won't it? Cradles, bye.
Okay, we've talked about lots of misrepresentations of the Judge Dredd world, but let's get on to Why is it good? Why do you think it has lasted so much longer than all the other strips in 2000 AD?
I think that's because it can tell contemporary stories with a twist. So you can actually, the stories can really be about today, but with a sort of a weird overlay of the future, with a sort of oddness that makes us actually reflect on today. So I think that's that. I think what ifs are always interesting. I mean, the idea of what could you survive a zombie apocalypse, or what would happen if you travel back into the medieval period? Could you be a knight, or what would battle be like? That kind of thing. I think all of us are quite fascinated by that. And this is actually speculating about what the future might be. I mean, if you think about it, it's an utterly authoritarian regime. Almost nobody has a job. Everybody's poor. I don't really, money.
Most people live in small, pokey flats, in great big blocks of flats. There's something like 87% unemployment. Yeah. And the judges are presented as necessary for keeping order in such a densely populated environment in which people are driven near crazy with boredom. And one of the reasons they're so bored is that there is this idea that robots have now taken over the work of almost all humans. So all mundane things, all things like cleaning and transport, they're all done by bots.
And they have job riots, don't they, where there's a job vacancy.
There's a job going at whiffing gas.
And everybody rushes over there. And they have huge riots because there's one job. And I think there was a law, if I'm right, about shop mannequins.
Oh.
I think there was a law that 1 in 3 shop mannequins has to be a human being to give them employment.
Right.
Something like that. So in every single shop window, 1 in 3 has to be a real person, and they have to stand there and be a shop mannequin. They're terribly proud of the job.
I remember there was one story where someone was arrested and found guilty of having 3 jobs, one of which was as a bed tester.
Right.
Which was how he was able to do the other 2.
And then there's that, do you remember the Sky Surfer series, Chopper and Marlon Shakespeare? Absolutely fantastic story. I really loved that character. But his dad had a hobby of heading eggs into a bucket. He was a sort of a quasi-professional egg head butter. And his mum, I think his mum was a professional dishwasher, so but what she did is she bought dirted plates, and then washed them, and then dirtied them again. Her hobby was endlessly washing and dirtying plates, and his dad's hobby was headbutting eggs and failing miserably to do it into a bucket. And as a parody of muck jobs and meaningless sort of pastimes that people have, I think it's 2008. I think it appeals to all of us. We see the absurdity of our own situation writ large in a comic book.
It's about a lot of other things, though. It's about how a society might be run, the nature of power, and to whom it can be entrusted, and I do like the way that most of the time the judges are shown as genuinely selfless. They are acting, certainly Judge Dredd is, acting very definitely in the interests of the general population, and he's quite happy to sacrifice himself. He's always putting himself in peril. I like the fact that it's loyal that way, because a lot of stories, a lot of writers, particularly today, I think would try to undermine that and show, no, actually it's a corrupt system. But no, by and large, the judges are not corrupt.
Yeah, that's true.
And that makes it a more interesting story, because if they were corrupt, then you could say, they're all bad. But because they're not corrupt, doesn't mean that you can necessarily argue that it's the right way to run the society either. It's more nuanced. And you can definitely sympathize with the judges, and you could even imagine yourself wanting to be one.
Well, people have said, it's a fascist regime, and I suppose you could say that, but it actually isn't. It's other. I think it's separate from that. I mean, as you say, they have absolute power, but they use it to the benefit of all. They're sort of like the arch benevolent dictator. They are empowered by this set of rules to try and look after people as best they can and reduce madness.
And something which illustrates that is that Megacity is particularly populated with oddballs. The judges in Megacity 1 actually think that the general population are just a load of weirdos, and that they, the judges, are normal ones. The judges, by law, have to tolerate all all the craziness of the general population, as long as they don't harm anyone, don't break a law, they can wear whatever stupid thing they want to wear. Like the fatties, for instance. It's a fashion in Megacity 1. It's actually a sport, isn't it? It's competitive eating.
Competitive eating,
and you have to put on as much weight as you can in so many hours.
Well, there's speed eating, then there's eating for duration eating. Basically, if you can imagine all the running things, they do it with eating. So, there's all sorts of variations on it as well. Yeah.
But if that's what the citizens want to do, and they get some of them so fat that they have belly wheels, they have a big wheel which they rest their bellies on so they can actually walk along.
And they have militant fat rights as well. They have marches where saying, because in some of the situations they've had a limited amount of food, and of course fat people, who are fatties, demand an increased ration than skinny people because it's their right to be fat, and so you get the really interesting stuff there. And then remember the story about blobs? Do you remember blobs? When people injected their face to create a sort of featureless human head so they could do crimes.
Yeah.
And instead of saying you can't become a blob, what they did is say, of course you can become a blob, but you have to have an identity number stenciled on your forehead so you can be identified. And I just thought that was a brilliant way of solving it. Don't make it illegal. It's entirely allowed to do it, but you still have to have an ID number on your forehead.
Right, and they're doing that to protect other citizens.
Yes. Yeah.
One of my favourite stories was one about athletes, and it turned the modern attitude to sport completely on its head. There's a guy who's a naturally really good runner, and he trains really, really hard, and rather than being admired, everyone boos him when he wins a race, because as they argue, the central message of sport surely is that absolutely anyone can be a winner if they have take the right drugs and have the right implants and the right mechanical legs and so forth, and the right sponsorship. But this guy's just some freak. He wins because he trains really hard, and he's just a naturally good runner.
And it's the subversion. That's what's great about the best writing in 2000 is it subverts things and makes us look at them in a different way. As I was talking to somebody we were talking about equality and as you do sometimes, and we were talking about, well, how do you make everybody equal in sport? Well, I suppose you have to take all the good people
and hamper them.
Because there's no way to make, I can't run very fast, and somebody can run much faster than me. So how do you make me run as fast as them? Well, you don't. You say they've got to slow down to run it. So you have to hobble people. Would basketball be better if you had to have average height people in it? Well, no, you have specialist tall people.
They have weight categories for boxing. Why are there not height categories for basketball?
Yeah, or you could have a total human length for a team.
One really tall
guy and one really short guy who doesn't do anything, and you could that actually might be quite a fun sport. Actually, thinking about it.
Yeah. Okay, so Judge Dredd. Then we have digressed, but it's kept up its quality remarkably well, considering how long it's been going. Can you remember when it started?
77, February 77.
77, okay.
Well, there were lots of work done before that, and we've got issue 0 of 2000 AD in the office, which is the one that was the dummy that was done to say it could be made. We also have some of Carlos's very first sketches for the look of Judge Dredd, which is interesting to see how the character has, not the character, but the look of the character has changed over.
Yes, he doesn't look as Clint Eastwood as he started off.
No, absolutely not.
So it's roughly as old as Star Wars, and there's been roughly a story coming out every week. And now, of course, there's the Dredd zine and the magazine, so a few in parallel now. So you've got experimental stuff in 2000 AD, skiz and I'm struggling to think. I don't know, ace trucking. They're not very experimental. I'm just trying to think of other Rogue Trooper, another mainstay.
Kingdom recently. Not recently, in the last few years. Kingdom I thought was really interesting. It played with language about very very after humans kind of world, but on Earth, which I thought worked really well.
Going back a bit, Ballad of Halo Jones, which was wonderful. Anyway, so you've got those, and occasionally, like Ballad of Halo Jones, you get a bit of gold. But there's also a lot of stuff which, it's not that great. To be honest, I could never stand ace trucking. I'd often just get past that. But if you've got a magazine like that has loads of stories in it, you can afford to be experimental with some, But Judge Dredd, you're now committed to having Judge Dredd in every single episode, so you've got to keep the writing standard high. Is there any method to that? Or?
Well, I tell you what, they obviously didn't have complete confidence in Judge Dredd as a character because he doesn't really feature in episode 1 of 2000 AD. It was all they lean on Dan Dare of all characters, who's sort of sunk without a trace and isn't really around very much anymore. He's had a golden age, but isn't around anymore. So they obviously weren't super confident in Judge Dredd being that standout character, but he became that standout character very quickly, which is interesting. What was the question? How do we keep it going?
Yeah, you've got to curate. You've got to keep the standard up of one of these. You can afford to experiment with other people, try new writers or whatever. But with that, you don't want to have a period of Judge Dredd where it goes a bit. You want to keep the quality high.
Well, I was talking to Matt Smith, who's the editor, and it's his job. He's the longest-serving editor now, 2000 AD. I think he's done 20 years or so doing it. And he said he feels that 2000 AD is in its third decade of the golden years, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at it. He just sort of understands. He said to me, quite frankly, he commissions stories that he thinks he's going to be entertained by, and it's sort of he's the bellwether. And there's so much work to look at and to appreciate that we've got a generation of writers coming through that grew up reading the work of the maestros and the people that first started it. And it's almost sort of part of their DNA. It's part of how they've become writers.
Right.
And so they've absorbed that sort of Andy Diggle, who's one of the editors, explained the difference between 2000 AD and some US comics. It's like that we don't want a pint of beer. What we want is a shot. we want a shot of vodka or a shot of rocket fuel.
Right.
We want it compressed storytelling. We want people to be turning the page and going, oh my goodness, in 5 pages they've told a story that might take 30 pages in other forms of comic. So compressed storytelling and interesting ideas are at the heart of it. And I just think there's a bloody talented group of people working on the comic, and I think we're incredibly lucky to be at that position. And it's got the support of a company like Rebellion, who's invested and reinvested in it, and has given them complete confidence to do some experimenting and not worry if it's a failure, but move on and do the next thing. So we're launching. We do. I don't know if you've seen the all ages editions. Every so often we do. I think once every 3 months we do an all ages 2000 AD. So it's part of the normal run of 2000 AD, but we specifically make it so that there aren't any things in it which are too adult. They're designed.
No decapitations.
No decapitations, no nudity, not too many incredibly awkward concepts. We don't grapple with adult concepts in those sort of all ages progs, because we're very aware that we've got loyal readers who've got kids. And the loyal readers want to pass it on to the kids, but some of the things that we talk about are quite grown up, actually. Politics, democracy, all that kind of stuff, and it's suitable for an adult audience, but maybe not suitable for kids in the same way. It wouldn't entertain them in the same way. So we're very deliberately trying to make editions that can be passed on to your kid, and you can then, as a dad, a mum, and a son or daughter, you can have discussions about 2000 AD and the things that are going on.
Okay, so you're thinking long term then. So he keeps his helmet on because you keep the integrity of the character. He doesn't have a character arc. He doesn't go all soft. He doesn't say you can bend the law. Yeah. And occasionally it's family friendly so that the next generation can also read stories about the same guy.
Because this is heritage, this is culture, this is really important to an awful lot of people, and it's important to me to do it right.
Okay, so the answer to the question seems to be have the right people at the helm.
Yes, work with talented people. As well. If you work with talented people, you come across better as well. So it's about choosing good people to work with, and we've got an incredibly talented team. There's a lot of freelancers; they work for other people as well. But when they work for other people, they're perhaps a little bit more limited. There's only so much you can do with characters like Superman or Batman or Spider-Man, and they do a very good job. It's interesting, some of the 2000 AD writers often subvert some of those American stories when they're doing them, and sometimes those are really important runs of those comics because people go, oh, it's a slightly different story and a twist in the story, and that's the 2000 AD gene coming through in other people's characters, which I think is really interesting. But yeah, they almost always come back to us and want to explore ideas and new
So
things.
your writers, having gone away, written a few Supermans, they come back and write
often
for
come back.
2000 AD because they have more creative freedom.
Correct, yes. That happens quite a lot. Or they write for us as well as,
Right.
you know, and it gives them a sort of creative space to experiment.
Okay, so Judge Dredd is safe for the moment, and for
Not
at least
for the moment, as long as I'm alive, Judge Dredd is completely safe.
Okay, good. I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you so much for telling us about Judge Dredd.
Thank you very much, everybody.